How's it going, everybody? This man Tamar here. I want to thank you guys for coming through. Today we got a special guest in the house tonight, Waymon Brown. I think I've been knowing him about this around the space probably about 3 or 4 years at this point. We met up on the O'Shea space, and that's where we kind of met up at. Talked offline, vibe together. Yeah, man, he's been talking about this book for a while, man, and I've gotten it. It's a pretty good read. But what I like about this book, and like the book I'm going to be writing as well, it's going to be a lot of action oriented things that are within the book itself. I don't think there's a lot of pages that are wasted so far, and everything in here seems to be quite and pretty damn actionable. So, without further ado, we're going to go over the process of this book and actually what's in it with Waymon Brown.
Hey, what's going on, MOT? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you all the way, man. You can hear me all the way?
Yep, everything's perfect, man.
All right, cool.
Yeah, bro. Thanks for definitely having me on, and shout out to everybody that's joining us in the chat as well.
Yeah, what's going on, Mike and Neil? All right, so the first question that I have about this book is, what made you want to come up with the title for the book? The Designing the Unstoppable Black Man. Like, was that like a what was that process like coming up with the actual book title?
So the title itself I came up with under the premise that black men needed some actionable things that they could refer to that would basically help them know that their life is within their own control. So, of course, in this instance, when I'm saying unstoppable, it means, with the things that you have that are within your power, which is basically a self-management approach towards personal development, use those things to break past any personal barriers to achievement that you have. So that was really just the concept of it, and not letting anything stand in your way that's within your control.
Okay, that's what's up. Yeah, yeah, because I was like the unstoppable black man. So if and when you do these tours on campuses and stuff, man, it's a pretty good title to get people interested in at least looking at what's in the book.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost. All right. So my next question is, how long did it take you to actually physically write the book itself?
The book itself, I started gathering, my manuscript notes, um, probably earlier in 2021, around like February or March. But some of those chapters are actually like videos that I actually produced already, and some of it, are new chapters. So what I basically did with the ones that were already produced content, I just changed some things around, made it more readable and flowable for book purposes. So I added some stuff, I took out some stuff. But then when I got more into like the meat and potatoes of just going hard with just saying, okay, I'm writing my book, I'm in this process of just completing it, whether it be new information or information that I'm repurposing, that probably took place from like around the spring, like around March of 2021. And I was basically finished by about like September of 21. So about
Okay.
6 months.
So what was the editing process like? How long did that take?
The editing process, basically what I did after I completed my manuscript in September, I submitted it for copyright. Library of Congress, they actually got me my copyright kind of quick because I thought it was going to take like a couple of months, but it came back in like maybe 2 or 3 weeks. In the process of that, though, I had actually looked at some editors online and I actually found a guy on Upwork.com. He's a black guy that I found. I looked at his profile. I liked his body of work and some things that he had done. So probably around like the start of October is when I did an outreach to him. And, he said, I can do some proofreading for you, any sort of errors that you have or anything like that. You're going to have a lot of oversights in your own writing. And then if there's any editing suggestions, then I'll make sure I do that as well. So basically, it was the majority month of October and November where he spent time doing that. We had a little bit of a delay with a couple things on his end. He had some stuff that he had to work out because our agreement was a little bit shorter than the length of time it actually took him. But I was patient with him. We had a good communication overall. So it took probably about like, a couple of months to get all the editing done. And then around like early December is when I started working on the book cover itself.
Oh, okay, cool. I want to thank people coming through. Michael Neal, Laro, A Reasonable Man, Brandon Franklin, and Eric Bird. Thanks for coming through. Make sure you hit the like button upon coming into the video. Um, my next question. Did you tell anybody in your family that you was writing a book?
Uh, you know what? Actually, I probably didn't even really mention that until it was almost complete. I think I may have told my dad about it, like probably around late summer. Same thing with my mom, but it was basically at a point where I was already getting it knocked out. And my parents, they've been familiar with my writing, for a long time because I've been writing, even though this is the first thing I've actually published, like on a professional level, writing a book. But really, I was just so much in my own zone doing this. I really didn't even mention it to too many people, really, until like it was almost over with. So I mentioned it to them, but it was basically at the end.
I mean, did you provide them a copy for them to read and to get like some feedback from them when you actually did do that, or if you did that?
Yeah. So my dad, he's going over right now. My mom, she is as well. So they definitely do have copies of it. Yeah, most definitely. And it's a couple other people, close family members as well, who have been able to get some copies of it too that I've been able to provide for them. So, and a couple other, friends and other people who just supported the book, but they definitely have been going through it and, asking me questions along the way and just looking at different chapters and learn about my outlook on certain things more as well.
All right. So for the next question, let's say that you're on an HCBU. Let's say you're at Mississippi Valley State, right?
Hmm.
And you're doing like a book tour, and somebody asks you for like a synopsis of the book. What would you actually tell them? Or stand up in front of a crowd because that's what you're going to be doing.
Hmm.
What would you actually tell them as an actual synopsis to the book?
Basic synopsis, I would say that the book is helping Black men to live a lifestyle of intention and to practice self-reliance. That would be the overall premise of it. Uh, this book is really about the belief that no matter what state your life is in, it's your own responsibility to create the circumstances that you want for yourself, even if you are, let's say, a victim of circumstance, so to speak, where you were born into a situation that was unfavorable that really you had no say in. It's your own responsibility to handle your problems. And this book gives you a combination of strategies and philosophies that will equip you to do so, based on a lot of things that generally Black men encounter as being, brought up in Black America at large.
Yeah. Oh, that's good, man. All right, my next question. Did you have like a sort of age range in mind when you was creating the book, or was it like an 18 to like 24 book? Did like what is like the youngest age that you think your book can make like the most impact on somebody?
Excellent question. Actually, I did. And it's kind of like almost how my channel is designed, which is when I look at my channel based on, the sort of things I talk about, the outlook that I have, I usually think for the most part, let's say 80% of that demographic probably being guys who are like 28 to about 45. I know I'm going to have some that are younger. I'll talk with a couple of guys offline actually who I've met through my channel who are younger than that. I know I'm going to have some that are older, but if I have to kind of give like an overall period of time where I would think the content is going to resonate with the most, it's probably going to be like a late 20s to about a mid 40s guy. And
Okay.
typically, if I just add to it, it's probably going to be somebody who also uh isn't married and probably somebody who doesn't have children, because it's a book that many would probably interpret as practicing individualism, even hyper individualism, any title that they assign to it. But realistically, the things I'm talking about are probably going to be for a certain person who is in that range and has a certain flexibility to practice certain lifestyle freedoms.
Okay. Doug, thanks for posting that. I just pinned it at the top. So the actual book there, the actual link to it is going to be in the description box once we get done. Once we try to have a panel after we're actually done talking here. But all right, my next question is going to be What was left on the cutting room floor that you wanted to put in the book, but you thought it really didn't fit?
You know what? It was probably just going into the chapters that I already wrote, but making them lengthier. So the big thing with writing this book is that I wanted to make sure that it was a concise read that people could enjoy reading and that they felt that they can get through, but that all the information was relevant. So it was more not so much a lot of things that I left out, but I came into it with an approach, with a systemized approach automatically. And the first time I ever worked with an editor years ago, it was a woman who, like 10 years ago, when I was doing some other writing, and she basically kind of suggested that to me because she told me that my writing was very lengthy and that I should probably, approach it from like a what am I trying to achieve and then work my way backwards. Whereas at first I was writing a lot more just artistically and just wanting to express my ideas. But if there's anything that I would probably say that was just a big thing that I made sure that I left out in one of the chapters of the emotional states of empowerment, one of the emotional states, it was actually going to be a sixth state, and I'll likely end up doing some content around it. But it was the state of basically being in like a warrior mode, and I didn't want to include that in the book because I thought that the sort of details that I would have with that would take away a little bit from the premise of that chapter. And it was also possible that depending on how I crafted that it could also be information that if a person doesn't really look at it with soundness of mind, it could be, somewhat dangerous. So I said what I'll do is instead of including a book, I have a better way to, express and articulate that idea later on and make it something separate, likely whether it's on my blog or whether I do a video on it. But that was something I definitely left out within that chapter.
Oh, okay. All right, that's a good answer. I like that. So, did you ever run into any writer's block when it came to this project?
You know what? I didn't really get like necessarily writer's block. What I started to have was times where I just felt like, you know, it was just kind of tough to get all these thoughts out because it's like I did a word count. I think the book has like 27 or 28,000 words in it. And my whole thing was just doing it on a time frame because I was so committed to at least publishing it in 2021. I had a lot of stuff I was doing, like a lot of us have, and dealing with COVID. I started doing some certification work with IT and a full stack course and working, of course, and doing normal life stuff. And I was trying to write. So I had more, I would guess you could say, moments where it was just a little bit frustrating getting out certain information out. But once I got rolling, especially by the time it was like around June, and I was about 3 months in, I just really just took off from there.
Okay, yeah, that's um. Which part of the book was the hardest one to like deal with? Was it starting off the book? Was it keeping the story or the narrative going, or ending it? Like, which one was the hardest part of this book to you?
Probably the most challenging part was not wanting to include so much information that like it kind of I would lose people, right? So that was probably around the time when I got into the chapter of how to think to live because I've already produced some content around that. But I wanted to go so much more in depth with that. But I knew that if I probably made that a lot lengthier, it would take away from the overall quality of what I wanted to do as far as making it just an enjoyable, digestible read. So there's like a conflict sometimes that you have where it's like you got all this good information, but at the same time you don't want it to just like disrupt the overall flow of what you got going on. And I think back to an interview, I think it was like an old Jay-Z interview when they were asking him how he puts together his albums, and he's like, I got all these hits that never made the album, but you don't want to just like try to cram everything on there just for the sake of like saying I did 30 tracks. And that's kind of like where I had got, caught up for a moment, but I was able to again revert back to that idea of just making sure that you start with the end in mind. And once I had that process going, it simplified my decision making a lot.
All right. So for the next one here, let's say that there's some sort of criticisms for the book. Like, how would you handle that? Like public criticisms of the book.
Excellent question. You know what? Well, first, uh, the thing about this book is that it's also a reflection of how I usually will handle a lot of things in my life, which is that I just make decisions and I manage the decisions that I make when it comes to my personal decisions. So I'm never uncertain about anything that I do when it's just me. If I'm involving somebody else, it's going to be different because I take a little bit more of a diplomatic role, and you're involving other people. But this book is something that I stand on, so it's already out there, it's already in print. Whatever my ideas are, they are. And if a person disputes those ideas, I'll leave that up to them to decide what it is that they think is valuable from the book or not. But it would really have to be some specific examples of some things that they would be trying to refute, or challenge, if you will. But overall, um, I took an approach where it's like I'm planting my flag and the information speaks for itself. So let's just say they get to a chapter and they're like, I'm not so sure if, let's say for an example where I talk about increasing your marketplace value. I'm not so sure if that's reasonable that you should try to make 50 to 100% more than what you currently make within the next year or two, which is something that I advocate for. And I give a sound way to approach that. Let's just say they say, well, I think you should go for 10 times more. That's fine. But that's not something I would really dispute because everything that I've written is so reasonable for the demographic that I'm addressing, that you basically be just having to kind of pick stuff out that you just want to go against instead of actually having something that's really worthwhile for real. Like, and I'm not saying that to say that there's no flaws or anything like that can come out, but I wrote it from a place of reasonableness and wisdom. So I would be more interested in seeing what it is that they have to criticize more than if they're just criticizing.
All right. For the next question, how do I say this? Have you thought about writing under a pseudonym rather than your real name?
Uh, there was a time where I thought about that, but you know what? I think when I decided to do my YouTube channel under my actual name, I figured I would publish the same way. And that's always a thing to consider because sometimes you got to worry about privacy or how you'll be perceived. Because I mean, Waymon Brown is my first and last name. It's not like a middle name or nothing. So that's something that has to be considered. But I'm very much so comfortable with anything that I say and anything that I do. So I didn't really see a need in this case to publish under a different name. But I think if for like a creative purpose, then it would be useful. Then I definitely would if it was like a future work though.
Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking, the same thing. Because I like when I first came into the space, I was using my real name, and I think like probably like after like 2 years, I changed my name to this, and now I'm kind of have been here for 5 or 6 years, and a couple people know what my real name is, but it's kind of hard to just because the name is already long, and you don't want to. Your name is long, and now your name is this.
Hmm.
It's yeah,
Yeah,
you gotta
yeah,
kind of stick with it after a while.
yeah, and it's something you have to definitely give thought to because it's also a part of your brand and how you're going to be perceived and everything like that. So like I said, man, when I did my channel, I remember speaking like how you mentioned O'Shea at the beginning, because that's where I basically, got more introduced. He's not the first manosphere content creator that I came across. It was other people before him that I did. But I remember he had asked me before we went live on my first stream if I wanted to use my real name or a different one. And I told him definitely I want to use my real name. So it's just something you want to think of, and you just be prepared for anything that comes with it. And I definitely made sure I was. So I'm comfortable with my decision for sure.
Okay. So, what was the most fun part, if there was a fun part, of the book that you were writing? On what was the most fun part to write of the book?
The most fun part was probably when I got to the chapter on becoming a Black Renaissance man. Uh, The
Oh, so
reason, okay,
what in the world was that?
Hi, I'm James from CTI Career.
Oh, go ahead, man. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
yeah, it's cool, bro. When I got to the Black Renaissance Man chapter of designing your lifestyle, because I thought that was probably the funnest chapter to write, because I literally broke down how to organize your life based on your skill sets and based on your strengths and your interests. And that's also a chapter where I encourage using the Myers-Briggs personality test. And I make sure, of course, I make sure people know that I'm not acting like it's some science or exact thing. It's theoretical, but I still encourage at least taking it because it can help bring a lot of order to a lot of things. And I think there is a lot of relevancy with it. And in that chapter, I basically kind of give a design for you to live your life scripted, from selecting your career, identifying a vocation, how to separate those things, where to, spend time on certain hobbies, how to select them, how to hit milestones, how to be a student of certain things, so that you can basically live your life in a very interesting way. So that was more than likely by far my most fun part of actually writing a book. And the most fun part of the entire process was probably that, as well as when I just went for that last aesthetic on how I wanted, the book to look.
Oh, okay. And what was probably the hardest part to you to write of the book?
Hardest part. Well, I'll say the challenging part was when I got to the chapter on an interlude about women, because I wasn't even going to include that chapter at first. Um, because of the seven chapters, only two of them actually have anything to do with other people, which is the one about women and the chapter about working with other men. Everything else is just a self management, series of chapters, and just what you can do for yourself. So I was kind of wondering if I should write that, and if so, how I should approach it, because I didn't want to take on this thing where it seemed like I was giving suggestions on who you should be with and who you shouldn't be with and all this other stuff. So I approached it more from the angle of, let me just be realistic about who's probably going to read my book. It's probably going to be somebody who's getting their life together, improving upon where they already are. Not saying that you already don't have your life together, but making improvement from where you are as well. And if they are going to include women in their life, they probably want to do so in a way where they're not a distraction, and where they can assess how they want to include them further. So that's how I had to really just stick to that, instead of going off into a lot of other things I wanted to go off into. And I think I approached it in a real concise way. But yeah, for a minute, I was just kind of uncertain if I should even include it. But I was like, I got to pretty much include it, because I mean, I'm making a book for men who want to deal, at some point in life, they, or in whatever capacity, they're probably dealing with females on whatever level, even if it's not a priority. So I approached it from that angle, and it worked out.
Oh, nice. So for the next question, since you did bring up the Myers Briggs, so which four letter word thing are you?
Excellent, man. Actually, INTJ, the introspective, intuitive, thinking, judging type. And I even put in the book how when I first took the test, I was like around 13 or so, and I was an INTP. And when I retook the test, it was like about a year or two ago, and I was an INTJ. So in 20 something years, nothing much had really changed, except for that last letter. I'm still, identified mostly introverted, still intuitive, still more of a thinker. It was just the judgment part is what changed versus the perception part. And I think that's because as I got older, I became a lot more action based. And I think it was a very, very accurate description, probably like about 85 to 88% for me when I really read through it too.
Oh, nice.
You ever
Yeah,
took it yourself?
I'm also an INTJ as well.
Oh, wow.
I didn't believe it, but I thought I was an INTP at first when I read most of it. But like over the time, like nah, they right. So
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I said, man, like I didn't want to promote it like, yo, this is some, like people be doing with all a bunch of zodiac stuff. And like it wasn't
oh,
even supposed to be that esoteric. But I'm like, man, just take the test and just see what it says, because I mean, it is based in psychological theory, and just see what's up. And I'm telling you, man, when I started looking at it, it made a lot of sense, because basically it helps you to see how you kind of learn and how you perceive the world around you. And it helps you kind of organize certain thoughts around what they call like 16 personality types. So yeah. And a lot of people consider, I think some famous people, if I could think offhand, is like a Bill Gates type, of Elon Musk, people like that are like the INTJ personality types.
Yeah, they are. Both of them are. I know Bill Gates is. All right, for the next one. So let's say that somebody picks up your book. How would you like for them to read your book? Would you like them to just boom go through the information, or would you like highlighters and marks and all this kind of stuff about things in your book?
I would want them to go through it in a way that's the most effective, because I know when people get books, like when I get a book, my style is typically I'm reading a book from cover to cover. But there are occasions where if there's specific information that I'm looking for that I know is within that book and is like a missing piece, then I'll just go straight to that chapter or those chapters that are related to that. Then I'll go back and get whatever else I need. So at the end of the day, it's just a composition of information. So, however people decide to decipher that information is up to them. But I would really ideally like somebody to read each chapter, mark that book up, take notes, see what makes the most sense, come back, question if it makes sense, see where it fits in their life, and figure out if there's a way to incorporate the philosophy I'm sharing throughout the chapters within their own world. So I really will hope that somebody is like a student of the book, and I think it's like short and sweet enough to actually do that, without feeling like it's some long drawn out affair.
Oh, okay. So for the next question I had, it was hold on a second. Read through here. All right, for the next question, it was I didn't like it the way it was worded, but I'll go through it anyway. So
Mhm.
so with this next question, um, what would you think a person would need to do first? Like you're done with the book, what would you want them? What would be the first thing you would want them to do once they're done with it? Read.
So the first thing I would probably say to do ideally would be to get to the part where you start clearing out the clutter and bringing organization to your existence. Because I think that if you just really take a snapshot of your daily routine and you say, okay, what am I doing on like a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis that makes sense for my life and that doesn't, where can I make some changes? How can I start using all this data of my life to, get myself where I really want to be? And I think that if they get to like the chapter on designing your lifestyle, I think that would be a good place to kind of start. The other place I would say that's a good place to start would be the first chapter, which is on baseline standards, because you pretty much can just make a lot of changes right then and there. If you decide that I'm going to commit to at least a minimum standard, have certain protocols, procedures around key areas of my life, and stop, just kind of letting life be something that happens to me, whether it's saving my money, whether it's working out, whether it's improving my interpersonal skills or my self-talk, my communication skills within myself. I'm going to have a baseline way that I'm going to handle these areas. That in and of itself could change everything. So those are probably the two main areas that I would say. But if there's something that strikes you and you know that you have an issue with it, like say on the chapter of women, where I really help guys to esteem themselves very highly when it comes to dealing with women. If that's something that really strikes you and you like, what, this is the biggest Achilles heel in my life, is dealing with a certain type of chick that's like, or dealing with these series of types of women that I keep running into, then go with the thing that hits you first as well. So, everybody's going to interpret the information according to what they see most fit. And I would say that those approaches from those two chapters, and then also just with an asterisk. But if something happens to resonate with you more, go with that first.
All right. So with this book, and it's a either or. Was this just an expression of your personal way of doing things, as you said, or was there part of your personal belief system that you had to change once you started writing the book?
Uh, well, the beliefs that I have by the time I got to the book, like what I have written, there were beliefs that I already had. So um now how recent those changes may have been, sometimes that might be a thing, because like certain things I've learned over time, or like say even since being a part of like what we call this space or the manosphere, Certain things that I've thought about, have changed over time when it comes to uh, certain aspects of life, but not much because I already had my own compass on how I do things. So when I wrote the book, I really didn't have to change anything at all. It was just more of, I think this is a very pragmatic approach for people who are probably going to be reading this book. So I'm like, okay, let me just start with where I think a lot of these brothers are, and let me be relatable and try to give like a practical approach to dealing with certain key areas of life, But not there was never a point where in my writing I was like, I had to change something about how I thought in order for me to put out the information, in order to make it like, a good chapter or worthwhile. It was like, this is where I'm already at, the culmination of events in my life, whether it's ideas that came up in the last 3, 4, 5 years or ideas that I've had for the past 10 years or more, but I made sure that I included things that were pertinent to me and that were also identifiable with other people.
So after writing this book, do you think you can just go in, or are you better able to articulate, like going through this whole process? Do
Mhm.
you think that you're better able to articulate doing it very quickly if you had to write on another subject?
Absolutely. When I finished this book, the first thing I remember thinking to myself was like, now that I wrote this, I can write anything. And it was more or less though from the angle of the stuff that's not even as intensive to write. Like say if I'm coming up with an article or something like that, um, it should be very easy or fairly easy, because once you get something like this out the way, it just makes everything a lot more approachable that you've already done, and that doesn't even require as much involvement. But I definitely had a very big confidence booster. But I've always been confident in my writing, even as young as being a young kid. I knew that there were areas of improvement, of course, just like with any other skill. But I've always been confident that I can express my ideas on paper or in speaking, out loud. Um, but I definitely felt that, man, and I know for a certainty if I put my mind in something, like I'll just give everybody like a little bit of a next thing that I got going on. It'll likely be a novel. It's pretty much like 80% of the way through the first draft, and completely different, thing. It's a novel. It's a lot lengthier, the whole nine. Uh, I'll get into that at another point, probably more in depth. But it's something I've been working on and off through over the years. But I know, I can definitely complete that and complete any undertaking that I have in front of me when it comes to putting together some information.
All right. So while we're on the topic of books, what's your favorite genre? Genre.
Favorite genre? I really mostly read a lot of nonfiction personal development books. And I haven't really went over any poetry in a minute. I write poetry. But I'm a big time, like I like personal development books the most. Napoleon Hill, might be probably my overall, I guess you could say, favorite writer in that way. But I've never really been a person who's been hardcore into like fiction that much, even though, like I said, I'm writing a novel that's fiction. But self help, personal development, and growth is probably like my genre that I'm always gonna pick up 9 times out of 10, or some sort of a business book.
Yeah. I mean, for me, being a law enforcement guy, it's always those crime thrillers. I
Yeah,
like to try to see how people think and try to put myself in that person's shoes if I could, depending on what the crime is, obviously.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. And you know what, I've been trying to get into a little bit more, books like that, like because I do like books that are like based on movies too, or where they wrote the book first and they came out the movie, like like The Silence of the Lambs. I like that type of stuff. um, Very lengthy, detailed things. Couple Stephen King books, but I do notice that when I do read just books for just relaxation, or something that's not super studious, that those are the types of books that I normally like getting into.
oh, nice. You have like three more other questions here. All right. So let's say that you're on a campus of an HCBU. and somebody who was like a very introverted guy just kind of stood off in the corner. And you kind of met this dude like later on, and he had a conversation about the book. And the guy would pretty much say, what would be the most practical thing that you can take away from the book in the first chapter of it that they can use, that they can use
mhm.
right away?
If he's more of a kind of keep to yourself a little bit quieter type of person, reserved, if you will, because I'm also known to be kind of reserved. Even though I have no problem discussing things either. I can kind of do it when I need to. But somebody like that, I would probably say if they're just going off the first chapter, the baseline standards chapter, I would probably say make a decision on where you think that you need to make the most improvement or something that has been bothering you that you know that if you just had maybe one technique or one strategy or one thing that you could change or implement, it would be a game changer for you. So, if the guy maybe didn't want to ask something up front, like if I'm at a college or something and, I'm having like a Q&A discussion, they wanted to talk on the side to me, that's probably what I would say is think of when you think of your life, whether you're combating issues with jealousy, you know, when it comes to wanting a woman's attention, something like that, or feeling like, why isn't this particular type of woman checking for me, or even jealousy in the sense of other people's accomplishments. If you're having an issue with your self-esteem, if you're having an issue with making a commitment to learning, whatever that thing is, the first chapter gives you practical ways to say, I'm just going to commit to this one level where if I don't do this one particular thing, it'll be akin to having some sort of an identity crisis over time because it's like, how can I not commit to this one particular thing? Right. Like for me, when I had like a really bad year in 2013 financially, which is like probably my worst year as far as just being completely broke, when I committed to saving at least 10% of my net income from whatever I did, whether it was, some money I had coming in from a job or whether it was a project I had or a side thing, that became so much a part of me where, let's say, even to this day, even though I've greatly increased and I don't just save money either, but if I didn't do that, I would probably begin to have some type of physical illness type of feeling if I didn't do that because I've made it so much a part of my identity where it's like, how can I not do it? Just like, how can I not, brush my teeth when I walk out the house? I wouldn't even feel right. I would feel horrible. How can I not like bathe for like, a couple days or something? I just wouldn't feel right. So what I would say is figure out the thing that you're going to commit to that that will make a difference and that will bother your conscience if you don't do it and let that drive you.
Nice. Was there any chapter that was particularly emotionally draining to you? You think?
Hmm. Let me think
Or
about
I
it.
guess which one was the most, I guess, draining chapter to write?
Well, the one I would say that probably had a lot of emotional inclusion was on the 5 emotional states of power when I was writing about peace of mind, because that's been something that I personally struggle with for a long time, creating peace about situations that I've, dealt with in my life. And just like how I'm saying now, the same way I would suggest that, that person who might come to me at a college campus and ask what they can implement from the first chapter. Well, even though this isn't from the first chapter, the thing that I need to always work on with a baseline standard is making sure that I'm working on my state of peace because that's always been a hard struggle for me. And I detail that within the book as well. Even though I've gotten a much, much better hold on it, sometimes I do find it challenging to just kind of like let go of things that I've experienced or to not, even if I don't all the way let it go, but transfer it into something else that's more, resourceful instead of just harping on it and being bothered by it because, it can end up bothering me for like weeks and months and even year after year over time. And it could just be like one or two things that like there's nothing I can do about and it's over with, you know? So writing that, I definitely made sure I took a lot of attention to detail and I Wanted to, of course, be reasonable in the way that I suggested how to do it, but there was also a lot of emotion within in that particular part of that chapter.
Yeah, that whole problem solving and kind of living with the choice piece is, man, yeah, that's something I had to live with a lot myself because, a lot of things that you get into, especially when it comes to deaths around family members and all that kind of stuff, you're going to make the best decision that you can and it's not going to amount to anything, but you're going to have to learn how to live and kind of deal with it after you do it.
Hmm.
And a lot of early loss, dad, mom, grandfather, all that kind of stuff. So it's like, I think there's a major thing for people to do because we all try to hold on to so many of these broken pieces until we think they're gonna formulate into something, and it never really materializes because these pieces of people were never meant to work together at all.
Hmm. Yeah, that's always a hard thing. Especially like like when we in this part of our black male media space, we know a lot of conversations over the years have been disgruntlements and experiences that people have with women for whatever reason, whether it's whatever they've been through, uh wife doing something to them or cheating on them, whatever it is, or just getting your heart broke. But a lot of times we have those types of things still residing within us because we're trying to make sense of things that we really don't have a all the way answer for, and we're trying to get some type of closure about something, or piece it together and just make it make sense so I can just move on my life. But the closure never really comes except for when we create the closure for ourselves, because even if we can get an answer for certain things, we don't even know if it's the real answer. Number one, if let's just say if it was something that happened to us or a person that did something to us, we don't really know if it's the answer. But on top of that, we're leaving the power in their hands to determine how our happiness is going to turn out, because we're basically saying we can't really deal until they make it right, or we get some amends that are addressed. And that's why that chapter was also a big deal for me, because it was basically saying you have to figure out the best ways that you're going to go about your life to deal with the things that have happened to you and to make peace about those things. And I use the reference of the bald eagle, where, at a certain point in the eagle's life, the eagle has to basically take his talons off and break his beak and pluck out the feathers and everything, because all that stuff becomes too weighty for them to go ahead and keep on living. And then they can decide to either extend their life by basically taking off that old garment, if you will, or they can just die and die early death if they keep on letting all that weigh them down. And that's something that we all have to deal with, and something that we all have to sometimes struggle with. But that's a very real thing. Those are like the demons that still haunt us every day. And I still deal with a lot of those myself.
Oh yeah, man. Like a lot of people have to understand that it's not a victim mentality based thing to notice that your ass is behind. That's not a victim mentality based thing. Now, stand behind and knowing better, yeah, that's some victim mentality nonsense. But people have to learn that you can't travel with all that kind of stuff with you. You clearly can't, and it's never been tried, and it's never been successful whenever they've seen it. And just most people don't have enough associations that even work anyway. They try to keep them all, and they end up destroying them eventually.
Right. Absolutely, man. And sometimes we hold on to certain things because it's also us, our ego, that wants to try to fix something. And it's hard to sometimes take certain losses. Um, and it's really difficult to come to grips with that. But you definitely have to try to figure out a way to handle those things and those challenges. And we also, I think we should kind of grade ourselves, because if we were in school, we get a certain amount of time that we can learn our ABCs. We get a certain amount of time that we can learn division and algebra, or else they're going to hold you back or you fail. I struggled like with math my freshman year and my sophomore year, as a matter of fact, with algebra. And now it's funny because I loved algebra and I hated it back then. But that standard was still the standard, right? And we don't want to be callous in the way of dealing with our personal issues like that. But I think that it is also reasonable to say, okay, I have to give myself a certain amount of time and take measures to get past this thing, just like I would if it was an exam, you know, just like I would if it was any other area of life, because at the end of the day, I still have to perform. And you may not eliminate every bad thing, but you can at least get it managed and under control so it doesn't dominate your life.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it was history. I just didn't find anything interesting. Well, interesting, well, with that. Well, that part. But once it started getting into things that actually happened, like in the South, I was really interested in that, man. Really interested in that.
Yeah. And sometimes it just takes that particular topic, to do it for you. That makes sense, and you need to see how it relates to why you should be interested in it. Just like if you travel a lot, geography may have not been a big thing when you were in school, but if doing your travel thing, it's probably going to be, or at least in theory, it should be a lot more important if you're going to be an enthusiast about it. Because sometimes we do need to make that connection between education and where we see it actually fit in our life for us to really grab hold of it.
Yeah, correct. And that's when I just started putting, all the dots together. Like, yeah, the math and stuff can get you far, but the historical piece combined with all that other stuff can make you go a lot further. And then I found myself going back and reading all of the, checking out books at the library that stuff that I just, wasn't interested in. But then I seen how all this stuff kind of connected together and it was the same cycles. And then you have to see how other people dealt with it and they moved past it because this whole thing was a problem solving exercise. This whole life thing is a problem solving exercise. So you
Hmm.
have to see how these people dealt with it in their time when things were much worse, where where your freedom was much more restricted. How did they apply themselves? How did they? I mean, a lot of people got their product stolen away from them, but how did they still try? How did they still succeed? Who did they even go to? All that
Hmm.
stuff was important to me, especially for like George Washington Carver.
Hmm.
All the stuff that happened to him.
Yeah, and that's why history is such a good um, is such a good thing to reflect on because, like you said, I mean, those people from the past, they didn't even a lot of times have the same resources. Even
Right.
as something as simple as medical care, dental care. Imagine if there was no like you can't get your mouth numb rather, but you need a tooth pulled, right? And people had to really, in some capacity, deal with that. Or even when something I think about that's always kind of like a little disturbing thought. But think about how many people were actually in history probably buried alive because people didn't really know how to determine if somebody was actually dead or not. Like that's happened to people where they actually got buried alive before the medical advancements and people really knew. And they could have woke up in the middle of that, and next 3 or 4 days after they suffocate and run out of oxygen, water is just over. It's just a messed up way to go out. So sometimes I think that we um, can benefit a lot by studying anthropology, by studying history, and just looking at the makeup of societies and people and how far we've come and realize that our problems are really not new. People have been getting dogged out since the beginning of time. They've been getting murdered innocently since the beginning of time, stolen from since the beginning of time. All the things that nobody wants to deal with. We've been going through it as a human race forever. So it's always good to look back and look at other people's stories and how they overcame stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I don't really have much criticism at all for when people get kind of caught up in the whole, well, this generation did this and this generation did that, and they should have done this, because each generation, they basically did what they thought made sense. And even if they didn't do everything, and even if the finger could be pointed about certain things, the finger is going to be pointed at us as well. 50 years
Oh
from
yeah.
now, 100 years from now, people are going to say that we were absolute fools and morons when they look back on the way that we live. How did they not know to do this? How did they not know that when they did this, then it was going to affect us 100 years later like this, right? And when we look at it, most people are just regular people who just walk around living life, going to work every day and don't really have much say over anything and probably just cast a vote. And that's about it, you know? So that's another thing, where sometimes that mentality comes in where, we want to look at things that have already taken place that you can't control. And that's why I say in the book that you just have to deal with the circumstances for what they are. Nobody has all the answers. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's flawless in their decision making. My zipper is stuck on my jacket. I don't even know the cure, so to speak, for that still. you know, Even with little things right now that people deal with in life, there's always going to be like these little things that people are still having trouble with. So I think we should be a little bit more careful about how we just cast certain blames on people who came before us. And even if we do blame them, it's not going to change our circumstance or outcome. So we still got to deal with the outcomes. And like I said, we also are going to be criticized when we 90, 100 years old or well past dead on our way out of here. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's said about us as well that we didn't get right.
Yeah, correct. I remember looking at Bill Walsh's book. The scoreboard to take care of itself. And that's kind of how the outcomes are, man. Because most people who want to team up right now are not the people who always been winning, right?
Mhm.
They know full well that we've never been this quote unquote monolithic group of well operating people, you know, and a lot of people, they just didn't do what they needed to do with the time, and it's showing right now
Right.
because of the complaints seem to be quite the same and circularized around the same issues that should have been solved 20 years ago or 30 years ago, or something that is a personal problem that they haven't even dealt with yet, or they don't know how to deal with it, or they can't get away from it, as most of these people you see.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, that's a fact, bro.
Yeah. So we're gonna be wrapping up the interview here. So man, what's next for Wayman, man?
Man, next for me, I definitely will keep everybody tuned to the novel that'll be dropping, but I'm gonna be promoting my book a lot more. It was a learning process for me, and it still is because, I didn't really seek out anybody who told me what to do on it. I just kind of, took advantage of the information that all of us have online, tried to figure out what I can do to just get this out. And, it was my first time doing this, and thankfully was able to be a success in the way of actually getting it out there, because that was my main thing. I knew the rest could take care of itself. Like I got a marketing campaign coming up, which, by the way, just as a suggestion, if anybody ever thinks about publishing on Amazon, which is what I did, just make sure that you definitely uh, have kind of like your communication channels in place with them, because I found it to be a little bit of a challenge when it comes to certain things. As far as getting my book up and ready, that was pretty simple, but sometimes their communication on the self-publishing and it's not as fluid as, like, when you're ordering something from them on just the regular Amazon end. So just to be aware of that. But yeah, man, otherwise, there will be some more content. I know everybody, like I didn't even drop videos except for like earlier last year, and then like after February, I didn't even drop anything. I know a lot of people was looking for that. I never left the space. I'm around. You see me pop in the chats and everything like that, and still
Your volume
around.
keep getting progressively lower and lower. I'm not sure what's going
Oh,
on.
okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure why it got lower, but you know, basically I had to take some time to really devote towards making sure that I completed my work. And so I'm glad that I was able to do that. But definitely be on the lookout for some more content. I've been paying a lot more attention to actually the article portion. So make sure you definitely go check out the esquireproject.com. You'll see some other stuff over there that I haven't done videos on as well. But you'll see me basically trying to get groups of black men together a little bit more, um, around the information that I have within my book, because I think it's something that could actually be studied and that could be applied within certain circles. And that's my next step that I really want to do, is start seeing tangible things happen as a result of my information.
Yeah, correct. Because my next step is doing the nonprofit thing and going back, to the South and bringing the actual opportunities to them, and then hooking them up with places to live like out the state and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of like the next phase of kind of where I'm going. So once I come out with this website, April 1st, that's what it's going to be around. It's going to be around really just bringing these resources straight to these people, man. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because
And
a lot of people don't know this stuff even exists. So if you can be a centralized place where you just remove all of the obstacles and the excuses for actually not being able to compete, they'll be able to do so because a lot of these people are going to be locked out of this opportunity forever. And I want to thank everybody who bought the book thus far during the live stream as well. Shout out to all of
definitely. I appreciate that, everybody too, and I think it'll be an enjoyable read. And definitely make sure you let me know what you think. I'm very accessible, and I'm always open to have conversations. So, if anybody has any thoughts on the book, whatever they might be, make sure that you let me know what you think of it when you can, when you get it. And I appreciate you so much, and thank you too, MOT, for allowing me to come on and putting it out there and sharing it with your community, your channel as well, bro.
All right, no problem, man. I'll create a community post and I'll put it in the actual comment section of the live stream, man. So you got any closing thoughts about the interview, book writing process?
Uh, Really what I would more than anything say is and this is not just so much about the book itself, but I would just encourage brothers to take advantage of the time that you got left um to make whatever changes that you want to make in your life and do whatever you're going to do. I'm 37, I'll be 38 in May. When I look at my life, I look at it from a angle of how much time do I probably have left realistically, and what can I get done within that time reasonably. And that's ultimately what the premise of the book is about. Making sure that you live your life with that type of design and intention, and be reasonable about those things, and to go ahead and get it done, because nothing is promised. And I think sometimes if you get caught up too much in like the conversations of the what ifs and what should we do next, and but you worry about people's criticism, and you worry about people trying to find fault with what you do instead of you just making the decision, it'll trip you up, and before you know it, you won't get anything done because you were so preoccupied with other people's thoughts and other people's concerns. So what I would say more than anything is have the freedom, practice your freedom to live the way that makes the most sense for you. Find other people that share that same common value system. Cultivate those relationships, and really try to make the best that you can out of what you have in life, and use what you can as well to try to make your life more meaningful. So that's all I want to close out with. And again, appreciate you so much and everybody in the chat for joining us.
All right, I'm gonna shut the show down, but don't leave just yet. You know what I'm saying? So,
Okay.
I want to thank you guys for coming through. I really appreciate y'all support and the people who did buy his book. It's important to buy people's books whenever they have them around here if they want to come on and actually promote them. So the name of the book, Designing the Unstoppable Black Man by Waymon Brown. The actual description is going to be in the actual comment section. And I thank and appreciate everybody for coming through. And you guys have a really nice night. Peace.